Good day and greetings from the Great White North. My name is Prickly Poo and welcome to day 176 of a year of change. Today we are starting week 26. This is our final week for the first 6 months that we've been doing this. So technically we're at a halfway point, but we talked about this yesterday. We're going to keep on going, so we're at the end of 6 months, sort of. We have 7 days to go. But today, as per usual, we're going to sort of start things off right, doing our weigh-in. Weigh yourself 3 times. Take the highest number. You should know how to do this by now. Now, last week we talked about the unsaturated fats and how they were the healthy ones and where like the different sources, like plant sources and stuff like that. This week we're going to talk about the other end of the spectrum, which is the saturated fats, which technically have, well, they've sort of gotten the term unhealthy fats thrown in there. In general, there's been a ton of research and, hundreds of thousands, or I don't know, hundreds of thousands, but thousands of studies anyway, on the relation between the unhealthy fats and heart disease and all sorts of stuff. And they're now leaning more towards like, well, we don't really know if there's a connection. So rather than sort of focusing on these are the bad ones that you need to avoid, it's mainly just for information for this one. So a lot of the stuff that we talked about last week, the unsaturated is, remember when there's a double bond, so there aren't enough, or not enough, but they don't have as many hydrogen atoms. That's all that this is as well. With saturated fats, there are no double bonds. So every single carbon atom that's in there, they have a little hydrogen atom poking out of them, as many as they can. There's no more room for anything. There are no double bonds, so they're saturated with hydrogen. That's the only reason why they're called that. Now, with unsaturated ones, also, they're generally liquid at room temperature. With saturated fats, they're generally solid at room temperature. So that's when you get things like animal fat, like the fat from bacon or a steak or something like that, or chicken fat. Butter, margarine, cookies, icing, stuff like that. Like those are the things that you find those are going to be the saturated fats. So in general, when you look at it, like things like pizza and sausage, like a lot of processed foods have saturated fat in them as well. You see why they sort of lean more towards the unhealthy stuff. Now, recent studies have shown that there really isn't any correlation between saturated fats and heart disease and, all the other bad things that they sort of linked in together. And as per usual, because people have done the same thing with eggs, people have done the same thing with, milk and wheat and all the other stuff. They go, oh, it's terrible. And then they're, well, it's not really that terrible. And then they come back and go, oh, turns out they are terrible. And then they come back and say, well, they aren't really terrible, but they're actually healthy for you. So this has sort of been flip-flopping that way as well. So, the main reason why I'm bringing this up is so that when you're going through and you're looking at stuff and saying, oh, these are the unhealthy ones, I can't have these, you shouldn't really be cutting it out entirely. Number one, it's not practical. Number two, we still need it. We still need those. We still need fats. You can do without, but they found that actually cutting out saturated fats is just as unhealthy as eating too many saturated fats. So it's sort of a balancing act. To give you all the information, they say if you're cutting out saturated fats, that's okay as long as you're replacing it with unsaturated fats, because you still need fat content in your diet. So as long as overall your fats are around 30%, try to get more of the unsaturated than the saturated. You're good. Things should be fine. A lot of the stuff that we do eat, though, now these pretty much react the same way. We're going to talk about cholesterol next week, but basically the healthy ones, the unsaturated ones, lower the bad cholesterol. Lower the bad cholesterol and raise your good cholesterol. Saturated fats lower your good cholesterol and raise your bad cholesterol. So how they react differently, I don't know yet. But that's why they look at that. But you still need it because they still help with cholesterol, transporting all your stuff around. So, and there are a number of things that we have, like vitamins and things like and nutrients that are lipid soluble rather than like salt is water soluble. If you pour salt in water, it will dissolve and then it just turns into salt water. There are certain things that are lipid soluble, which means that they won't dissolve in water, but they will dissolve in fat, fatty acids, basically. So that's why we still need fat in our diet at some point. The problem with us is that we tend to eat a lot of it. We eat, well, I did anyway, lots of nachos and burritos and other things ending in O, Oreos and SpaghettiOs and Steakios. I don't know what else starts with those. It was just coincidence. It's not just because you don't use that as a rule. Just go, it starts with an O, or it ends with an O. I can't even have it. Starts and ends with an O. Holy shit. Avoid that altogether. But those, I mean, as long as you have some of each, you should be good. If you are going to try to cut out as much saturated fat as you can, then try to replace it with the unsaturated fat. We need to maintain that around 30%-ish thing. Because that's so that we can keep operating in a healthy way. If you cut out fat entirely, then your body just shuts down. Like, you can't even process vitamin D without it. So we have plenty, so it's not as bad for us at this stage. We have lots stored away. I've got so much stored away, I'm stockpiling it for a war. I feel like Russia. But there's just, because we have so much of it, then it's going to use that for energy. It's going to use that to transport stuff. So we have a little bit of leeway. But in general, we sort of want to keep our numbers around 30%. So with saturated fats, again, you're looking at something that's going to be solid at room temperature. So margarine, butter, animal fat is a main one. So if you're going to cut down, when you buy a steak or something, just trim as much fat off as you can. Stuff like that. We talked about that last week as well. Again, don't go for fat-free or low-fat or anything like that. If you're going to get hamburgers, I get the either lean or extra lean. Extra lean, I find, sort of crumbles a bit. So that might cause problems, but lean generally is pretty good. If you remember a few weeks ago, by mistake, I ended up buying medium ground beef, and by the end of it, it's pretty much boiling in it. So just little things like that, just to sort of cut down on those things. You don't have to cut out any foods or anything like that. Just think. Be practical, be realistic, and look at it and say, okay, I'll go with lean and try to go from there. Same thing with, milk. There's another one. Although it's not really solid, the fats in it are. So I think that's how it works. Anyway, it's an animal product. So with butter and everything else. With milk, those are saturated fats in milk. So I end up buying the whole milk or homogenized milk or however you want to call it. Here it's just red. There's the skim milk, then 1% and 2%, and then real milk. And, I mean, a lot of people find it too thick. I just don't like watery milk. But the stuff that's in that, those are saturated fats. So, when last Wednesday, when I was trying all the soy stuff, I'm trying to lean more towards the soy. Not for, you can't hurt animals, because we aren't hurting animals. And no, milk is not poison, don't worry. Had someone the other day actually say to me, no, again, we've talked about this before. They said, well, it's designed for a 400-pound animal. Like, well, you're not drinking 5 gallons at a time like a calf would, you idiot. You're drinking a glass of it. Perspective. Anyway, don't want to get off track. So, with that, I mean, this entire week when I've had cereal, which I found out has a lot of sugar in it, I've been using the soy milk for it. I haven't really gone to drink like just a glass of it. Because it's sort of a rare thing that I do that, but I'm going to sort of lean towards that, not as a, hippie sort of thing. It's just that it has all the same nutrients in it. It tastes the same. It's for, what I use it for. It's good. And they've switched the saturated for unsaturated. So overall, if it's palatable and healthy, then good enough. We'll go with that. That's your saturated stuff. It's not necessarily bad, but it's not as healthy as the unsaturated stuff. But the main one that we need to look out for, and we've talked about this before as well, are the trans fats. Now, depending on when you're watching this, in 2018, then the FDA is trying to ban them completely. And I'm sure Canada's doing the same thing. But in the meantime, they are still out there. So, lurking under your bed. That sounded really sinister. So when you're looking to get stuff, those are the times that you can look at it and say, okay, look for trans fat. Unfortunately, anything lower than 0.5 grams per serving is going to say 0. So that's not going to be very helpful for you at all. So you need to do a little bit more research, find out exactly how much is in there. I mean, obviously, you're not going to see. I mean, there is some in regular like plant and animal stuff, but the trans fat stuff, that is the real dangerous stuff. And to give you an idea, this is a figure that I found out. For every 2% of your diet that is fat, that is trans fat. Like say that you were eating 2% of your diet was trans fats. Okay, so that's our baseline. If you were to up that to 4%, you increase your risk of coronary heart disease by 23% for every 2% of trans fats in your diet, or trans fat, which is really weird. Because eventually you're going up, and then you go up another, then it's another 23%, and then another, and another, and then you're going, well, then if you have 8%, you have 100%. No, it doesn't work that way. It just, your chances increase that way. Do some math and statistics, you'll figure it out. So those are the real dangerous ones. Generally speaking, though, it's fairly easy to avoid. Just keep an eye out. I mean, you're going to find a lot of that stuff in, like, margarine has it. Sometimes you can find anything that you see that says non-hydrogenated. Basically what the trans fats do, because we talked about this before, it takes the unsaturated, like all the ones with the double bonds, it breaks those, pumps more hydrogen into them, so that things like olive oil, for example, they'll turn that into a saturated fat, which means it's solid. The problem is, because of that process, it creates a whole slew of health issues that go along with it. So for something like that, keep an eye out for the trans fats, because those are the ones that we can cut out entirely and we'd be fine. We'll be okay. We don't need them at all. So anything that you see that says non-hydrogenated, that's good, because that means they haven't tried to, there aren't any trans fats in it. They haven't tried to pump hydrogen into it. So that's where the term comes from. So anything like that. So you can still do the margarine thing, even though they say now butter is better for you. So if you can do the butter thing, do butter. But if you find something, make sure that it says either zero trans fat or non-hydrogenated. You're not going to be able to get rid of it entirely, because, as I say, if there's something like 0.3 grams per serving, then they can say zero trans fat. And with something like that, then they're going to cut back on the servings until, say that you had a regular serving of something was 10 grams, okay? And they go, there's a full gram, like they're 10% trans fat. There's a full gram there. And say, good. Then make the serving suggestion, 4.9 grams. It's like, great. So we have 0.49 grams of trans fat. That's zero trans fat. We can put that in there. That's fine. So keep an eye out for the serving sizes as well, because that can be a little dodgy when you're looking at it. Those are the main things that we need to look out for. So if you're going to panic about anything, panic about the trans fat. In a few years' time, they're going to be completely banned, so you should be good. But in the meantime, just keep an eye out for them. If you have an option where you're looking at two different things, and one has trans fat and one doesn't, and they're pretty much the same, grab the one without them. Little things like that. As far as the regular saturated fats, it's just going to be a matter of, again, trimming as much fat as you can from stuff. You can't trim fat from bacon. If you're going to have bacon, then have bacon. It's okay to have it once in a while. You're fine. It's not going to kill you. But things like cookies and candies and stuff like that, if you're still eating those, which off and on I am. It's not proud of it, but it happened. Then just be very wary of it. And just even being aware of it is going to help. So those are the bad fats, pretty much, that we're looking at. I know this is really probably very dry, and you're just going, I don't care. I looked this up last time. So I'm going to put the same links in from last week as I did, or I'm going to put the same links in this week as I did for last week, because all the same information is there. It'll go through the different types of fat. It'll give you a little bit more information. There's one there from the Mayo Clinic. There's a graphic there as well, just to give you an idea, so you can sort of pick and choose which ones are better, and we go that way. I forgot to tell you as well, I did take a look at, because I was supposed to do this yesterday, our sodium intake and our fat intake. We're still working on that. My fat intake this week is right at 30, including yesterday. I added in all my stuff. It would have been a little bit lower, but Friday I had macaroni and cheese, which threw everything out of whack, but I still stayed within that 30%. So I'm very pleased. But more than that, and I know I'm supposed to only update these every 4 weeks, but I'm going to do this anyway. We're 2 weeks in. So my sodium, this was the first week that I was well below where I needed to be. My sodium for the week long average is around 1700. I didn't break the 2,000 mark once this week, except for Friday. Because when I'm going through my graph and it's going, all right, well, there's 1,100 here, and then 1,600, and then 800. And then yesterday was 500, which is really weird. But just sort of going back and forth this way. And then Friday, when I did the macaroni and cheese, it spiked to 4,500. So and it was just condiments because I included the cheese spread in the condiments. So everything is fine, and then just goes boop, and there's a giant stack there on Friday. So it would have been actually lower than that. So things are working out well, I think. We're on the right track. So, yeah, so sodium, fat, trans fat, saturated fat. There we go. That's it. Next week, we'll look at cholesterol and just sort of give you a quick idea as to why there's good and why there's bad and what it does and why we need it and how it can make your heart explode if you don't do it right. But again, there's with the saturated fat, you're going to hear a lot of people going, those are the bad ones. You shouldn't be eating those. You can still have them in there. It's fine. If you can replace it with the unsaturated, then, yes, that's better. But don't cut them out in an attempt to say, oh, okay, well, these are horrible fats, I can't have them. We still need them. Our body needs them to function properly in order to, process a lot of things, in order to create. There are a lot of food sources for, I was going to say vitamins, but that's not right, for nutrients that we need that our bodies can't produce. So we need those external sources, and part of that is going to be with saturated fats and unsaturated fats and everything else. And more than that, really, just broadly speaking, practicality. When we're doing this, we need to be able to continue to eat normally, and you can't go somewhere into a restaurant and then just go, I just need something with no fat on the steak. You have to cut every last bit off, and they will kick you out. I would anyway, because that's annoying. Anyway, that's it. Just a little bit of information. Keep tracking things the way that we've been doing. Make sure that your numbers are still up there. If you're looking at your fat content and you find that your saturated ones are more than your unsaturated, then yes, you probably need to look at your diet, tweak it a little bit, and try to add in more fruits and vegetables and things like that. Try to use different things like olive oil for cooking instead of margarine or butter, stuff like that. And where we did the soy thing, for cereal anyway, I don't know about just drinking it as a regular drink, but either going to like 2% or 1% skim, if you can do skim, bravo. And even 1% is kind of iffy, but it just tastes like a mouthful of milk that someone spit into a glass of water. It's just... But try the soy thing if you want as well, because you're getting all the same stuff out of it, just fewer calories and less saturated fat. And even if you just use it for cereal, it actually works out really well for cereal. There's quite a bit of sugar in it by the taste of it. So, which we're going to be working on in a couple of weeks' time, so don't worry, you have plenty of time to tweak that sort of thing. But in the meantime, that's it for this video. So thank you very much for watching. If you liked it, please poke the like button for me. And in the meantime, keep yourself warm and fuzzy, and I will see you in the next video. Bye-bye.